News Talk 1240.
Good afternoon, Chattanooga. This is Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this doc is in the house. On today's discussion, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that's of nutrition. What are you putting into your mouth? And more importantly, what should you not be putting into your mouth? So today, I'd like to invite you to call in here at AM Hot News Talk Radio. You can join us on the web via live stream at www.hotnewstalkradio.com. Join us on Facebook as well as Twitter. And if you'd like to call in and discuss any topic relevant to our discussion today, the phone number for live calls is 423-800-8949. And I gladly take some of your phone calls to answer questions today. So welcome. Today, I'd like to talk about something that is one of my absolute favorite topics, and that is nutrition. So as a local family medicine physician, as well as sports medicine physician, I get a lot of questions with regards to how can I live a healthier lifestyle? And, more importantly, I think when people come in and they have illness or injury, nutrition is sometimes the furthest thing from their minds in terms of trying to solve their issue, and it's often one of the first things that I bring up with them. So let's go ahead and start. One of the things that I talk about in my practice is what I describe as the 4 pillars of health. And a lot of times when you look at kind of the landscape of your life and what you feel is important to contributing to overall well-being, a lot of people, I think probably don't even think about that. But then B, if they do, how do you categorize it? Well, I'd like to offer up one of my philosophies, which again, I describe with my patients as being the 4 pillars of health, and really focusing on those 4 things. And today, one of those pillars that we're going to talk a lot about is nutrition. But the 4 pillars of health in general, I talk about is number 1, nutrition. And nutrition, I think, is like 80% of that equation for health. What you're putting into your body really does matter. If you're putting in a bunch of junk, then you're going to get junk output from it. So the expectation that, oh, hey, I've done great all these years and I haven't focused that much on it. And then suddenly you have illness or injury occur, that might be a moment of realization for people to say, maybe I do need to start thinking about these things. And then also, what are the silent killers that are going on and not giving symptoms to a person's attention span at that point? And then suddenly, we do screening with some of your preventative exams for your physical, and we find out, whoa, lo and behold, you have a terrible metabolic profile. And a lot of times that's something that the medical industry is now terming TOFI, TOFI, which is thin on the outside, fat on the inside. This is an unhealthy deposition of fat that we see around vital organs that is highly tied to negative health outcomes, such as myocardial infarction, which is heart attack, stroke, vascular disease, diabetes, insulin resistance. I could go on and on and on. So back to our 4 pillars of health. Number 1, nutrition, 80% of the equation. Number 2 is activity. What are you doing to intentionally be active through your day? I've got a lot of patients who, are surprised when I ask them on their intake, what do you do for intentional exercise? And a lot of times they'll laugh and say, well, what do you mean? Like, I have a busy job, or I take care of a lot of kids. Like, that's busy enough. Well, while that activity does count towards not being sedentary, there's certain qualities of activity that we look at that produce more beneficial outcomes regarding health than others. So I have a busy job and that's my exercise thing. Unless you're out there like building mountain bike trails 7 days a week, it doesn't really count in my book. We have to start getting some intentional exercise in there. The other thing that happens in that process of people putting more time aside for exercise is that you are prioritizing yourself, which feeds into the 3rd pillar of health, which is emotional well-being and grounding. I think that our lifestyles now are probably I mean, you could argue and say that they're busier than ever, but I don't think that the busyness factor has gone up so much as it has been our ability to deal and cope with stress. Our coping mechanisms have not really kept up with the advances that we have to deal with in our work careers, in our family lives. And so it creates this imbalance. And a lot of times we are the last to pay attention to what's going on with us. So I really try to focus as well on filling your own tank. And you do that through various methods and ways. And we will discuss those, I think, in future shows. But I do want to mention that emotional well-being, the third pillar of health, huge and very, very important. And the fourth pillar of health, which, everybody, even myself, we're guilty of this one and cutting back on it at times, but it is sleep. Sleep is so incredibly important. There are so many restorative things about what happens regarding sleep. And to be honest with you, we understand very little about why sleep is so beneficial, but we do know that after having a good night's sleep, pretty much everybody feels better the next day. And so a lot of times when I'm interviewing patients and we find out that they're tired, they're stressed, they're overworked, they're overburdened, one of the first things that I will encourage them to do is to set an alarm clock for bedtime and early bedtime, really giving yourself that full 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night and seeing if just doing that for a week actually improves some of their symptoms. That's pretty telltale in and of itself. So the 4 pillars of health, there you have it: nutrition, activity, emotional well-being, and sleep. Today, we're going to focus on nutrition. So in this first segment, I want to start talking about what people's idea of what you think eating healthy means. And there's a lot of different ideas, I think, about what eating healthy means. And so I want to start with a common baseline for everybody, because I think everybody could agree with this one. And that is, eating healthy is eating in a manner that is trying to produce beneficial outcomes. And really, those outcomes are very goal dependent. And so everybody's goal is going to be a little bit different, but then there's also some very common physiological goals that we're after in terms of human health. And those would be things like reducing your risk of disease. And oftentimes what you eat can help with that. One of the things that I want to stress is that not every eating style is going to work for everyone. A lot of times you'll hear things like in the media, like, this is the new diet craze. And I detest the word diet. It implies that it's a temporary thing. And this is really one of the things that I try to impress upon people. Eating healthy is a lifestyle. It is not a temporary part of your life. It is something that is a part of your life, and you need to dedicate time to it just like you do everything else. But the dividends and the rewards that you will reap from that preparation and that devotion to the discipline, it's huge. So I really try to have people embrace this as a lifestyle. When we look at different types of healthy eating patterns for people, sometimes even healthy, what we would consider a healthy eating pattern. One of the examples that I will use is a lot of times I'll hear people talking about eating a very high protein diet. Sometimes you'll see one of the common sports that I'll see a lot of high protein recommendations made for things like performance bodybuilding, really like muscle bulking types of strength training. And you'll oftentimes see very large amounts of protein recommended. However, if you're not being monitored by a healthcare provider, one of the things that you may see is that people can have or develop kidney, or what we call renal insufficiency, where the kidneys don't function as well because of the high protein load that they're undergoing. Not everybody experiences this, but it underscores why having individualized healthy eating patterns it's not a one size fits all type of category. So I really want to just make sure that we have this idea that people are able to come into a physician or come into a registered dietitian and be able to have some amount of advice given regarding their personal situation. Yeah. Oh, sounds like we have a phone call. Hi, caller. You're on the air.
Hi. Well, I know that what I'm doing is not the best diet or eating situation. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. But my big addiction is caffeine.
Okay.
And I drink a lot of Coca-Colas. I drink a lot of sweet tea. And I want to start cutting back. But, of course, when I start cutting back, I start getting these, caffeine headaches. And my main question is if I start to cut back, would it be better to cut back on the Coca-Colas or to cut back on the sweet teas to start weaning myself off?
This is an excellent question, and thank you so much for calling in. So when I hear that you're desiring to cut back on Coca-Colas versus sweet tea, the recommendation that I would make is, and the common element that I see in actually both of those are two things. I see sugar and I also see caffeine. And this is where people get startled because the caffeine consumption caffeine is an addictive substance. And here's where people are often surprised. It's sugar as well. So there's some really wonderful studies out there that have looked at comparisons in the rodent population of sugar and cocaine consumption in rats. And long story short, rats actually preferred drinking water laced with sugar than they did water laced with cocaine, which was like earth-shattering for people to like hear this in mainstream media. And there's plenty of other studies out there that compare blood flow for addiction centers in the brain when their subjects are consuming things like sugar versus cocaine. And time and again, we see that these addiction centers light up when people are consuming sugar. So two things that I would recommend for you. Number one, I totally recommend that people try to get added sugar out of their diet. And so how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to be able to identify where that added sugar is coming from. And there's one very simple way of doing this. All you have to do is the food that you're looking at. If you turn it around and you look at the ingredients list, which if you're eating what I call a quote unquote processed food, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, if you're eating a processed food, then they by law have to list the ingredients in the food. And those ingredients on the ingredients list, usually further down the label, are listed by their order of predominance. So if you start to see sugar or one of the 75 other names for sugar, things like high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltose. There's all of these different names for it. But if you see it listed as like item number 1, 2, or 3, you're pretty much eating only sugar, which is an addictive substance. And you will have a withdrawal from that alone when you cut it out of your diet to a certain amount. The second item that you've listed is caffeine. And here's what I recommend for my patients. When you're trying to, especially with caffeine, because caffeine and sugar both can produce some very nasty withdrawal symptoms. And so, yeah, so have you tried in the past trying to come off of these and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm left with a major headache and I feel irritable. Some people even have sweats. I mean, there's just a whole myriad of withdrawal symptoms people have experienced. I recommend a couple things, and it depends on how quickly the person wants to come off of it. If they're like, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm just going to get this stuff out of my diet, and they're able to do what I call the cabinet makeover, where they're like, they go through the cabinet and they just get rid of those substances in the cabinet that have the caffeine, that have the added sugars, then I tell them the first 3 days are going to be awful. Like you're going to have your headaches, you're going to have your irritability, but if you can start this on like a Friday morning, usually by the end of the weekend, that's when people go through the worst of the withdrawal symptoms, and then they come back and they start feeling a return of energy. Now, this also has to happen at the same time with introduction of some other healthy things in their diet as well. Like we try to kind of come at it from the forest view, if you will. So that's option number 1 for removing caffeine and sugar, two addictive substances from the diet. Option number 2 is a little bit easier for people, especially if you have busy lifestyles and you're like, I just can't afford to be non-functional for even a weekend with stuff. This would be the gradual reduction. So like if somebody's a big coffee drinker, I might switch them over to like a regular black tea, unsweetened if we can, or even going to a natural sweetener. My favorite natural sweetener is stevia, which is plant-based. I'm not a fan of the no-calorie sweeteners like aspartame, sucralose, which is Splenda, Equal, like the little pink packets, the little blue packets, the yellow packets. These are artificial sweeteners, and they have been linked to a host of diseases and symptoms. And I tell people my overall concept with food consumption is you need to eat real food. So stevia is derived from a plant, and so you're consuming basically a real food at that point. And it helps to, if you like a little bit of sweet in with your tea, or if you're having maybe less than a cup of coffee a day, then that's totally fine in my book. But I really would encourage people then, if you're trying to, reduce sugar, reduce caffeine, we might switch you over to, like I said, like a black tea that has less caffeine in it. You have to be careful because some of the teas out there can actually have a high caffeine content as well. Average cup of coffee, depending on the type of beans that you consume, can be anywhere from 80 milligrams to 120, 150 plus milligrams of caffeine. So it really depends on the coffee. We're going to cut to break right now, but I appreciate your questions. And when we come back, we're going to continue discussing nutrition. This is Dr. Danielle Mitchell. This doc is in the house, and please stay tuned for more.
Compass Media Network's coverage of the NFL. Hi, this is Jerry Recco. Join Kevin Ray, Danny White, and myself for all the action.
Fox News Talk 1240.
If it's the NFL, it's right here.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
Tired of insurance companies? Tired of doctors that won't spend time with you? Do something different. Leave the sick care model of medicine and come to Dr. Danielle Mitchell, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health, where we're interested in long-term health solutions, not the quick fixes. Come see me, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. I'm all about the long-term healthcare solutions and doing what's best. On the web, you can find me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. That's ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Or call us at 875-1005, 875-1005, or find us on social media, Facebook, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, or the ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Let's go, ya!
Hey, all you gun enthusiasts! Carter Shooting Supply has just bought a crazy load of guns and is having a crazy huge sale event going on now. A huge inventory of Smith & Wesson, Glock, Ruger, and Taurus all on sale. Taurus guns have a mail-in rebate for $25 to $50. All long guns and all ammo on sale too, just in time for hunting season. Come in and take advantage of this crazy huge sale event going on now at Carter Shooting Supply, or shop from home by going to CarterShootingSupply.com. Highway 58, Harrison. Check our prices before you buy.
Are you tired of working in corporate America, or have you recently lost your job and would like to consider owning your own business? If you are, please call me, as I can help you look at franchises or business opportunities that fit you, the economy that we're in, and the type of businesses that are right in the greater Chattanooga area. After I help my clients find the right opportunity, I also help them find the best way to finance the business, including paying yourself through the startup phase. If you would like to learn more about opportunities that may be right for you, please call me for a free assessment. My name is Bruce Krebs at the Entrepreneur Source. Phone number is 423-621.
If you have the DTs, the shakes, because your phone is on the fritz, you have nomophobia. You need help. Your telecom doctor is in. Cell Surgeon at Northgate Mall. Cell Surgeon yanks open the ribcage of your phone, pries out the dead heart, and puts in the beating life that you lead on your cell phone. Broken screen, phone not charging, water damage, battery given out? Cell Surgeon at Northgate Mall next to Old Chicago Pizza. Check us out on Facebook. Open Sunday. Cell Surgeon. We bring your phone back to life. Mention Hot News Talk Radio and get 10% off.
The Fed raising rates, China's economy in trouble. Don't let headlines derail your long-term financial strategy. I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Patrick Neal. At Edward Jones, we provide the tools for a reasoned, disciplined approach to investing. Stop by my office next to the Target Shopping Center in Hickson, or call me at 423-870-7894. That's Patrick Neal at 870-7894. Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
This is Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and you're listening to AM Hot News Talk Radio, and this doc is in the house. On today's segment, we are talking about one of my favorite topics of discussion, and that is nutrition. Already, we've had a great question with regards to how you can eliminate addictive substances from your diet. A lot of times, I think people are shocked to hear that, oh my goodness, it's sugar. But wonderful questions, and I invite you guys to call in. The number for call-ins is 423-800-8949. And it looks like we actually have a call right now. So hang on just a sec. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes. Hi, doctor. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Got a question. I was reading up earlier about whole milk and how it prevents heart disease. So what kind of milk would you recommend someone drink? 2% skim milk or whole milk?
This is a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So this is interesting because on the heels of our discussion today, sorry, we're doing multiple buttons here. The FDA today was actually just talking about releasing new guidelines with regards to milk consumption. And I want to give a couple of, got my antenna up because when we look at the history of FDA dietary guidelines, my personal opinion is I think that there's a lot of money that talks in Washington, D.C. And for some reason, when we look at how milk made its way onto the ADA's recommendations, the FDA's recommendations for healthy diet, milk really doesn't have a lot of research behind it. And when I ask people to evaluate research, I implore them to look at what is unbiased research. So when we look at this new recommendation that basically dairy fats have no impact on cardiovascular disease, I beg to differ. There is actually a wealth of science out there, especially when you start looking at some of the older references, particularly with regards to the Dean Ornish diet, and trying to get animal saturated fats out of our diet. They do actually, I think, have an impact for some people on negative cardiovascular profiles. Now, I don't want people to be fat-fearing, and this is really where I want people to take a look at what their individual profiles are. So if you're somebody who, let's say, has a high amount of cholesterol, and it might be from genetics, it might be also contribution from what you're eating in your own diet, then if you're somebody who is having a lot of dairy in your diet, then you may want to decrease the amount of dairy that you're having, because that is an animal saturated fat. And for some people, I really believe, based on what I see with their cholesterol profiles, that it can negatively impact their profile. The other caveat to that, though, is, and to get at your direct question, which type of milk should I be drinking if I'm a milk drinker, is there's obviously skim versus 2% versus whole. That's kind of the categories that most of them fall into. I am not a fat-fearing doctor. I am somebody who believes that eating and consuming fat is part of a healthy diet, but you have to know which fats are healthy. And that's often a loaded question as well, because what makes up a healthy fat? For the purposes of our discussion here, a healthy fat is one. So we can, and again, I'll repeat that, it's an anti-inflammatory fat. So when we look at certain types of fats or oils, soy has been getting a lot of attention because it's considered to be an inflammatory type of oil. It's cheaply produced. It's in a lot of things now. And so when we start looking at also animal saturated fats, those can also fall into an inflammatory type of fat category. So what we're trying to do is strike this balance for people. If your individual profile is one such that you have high cholesterol, then you may want to be cautious about consuming whole milk versus skim milk. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't have that much of an issue with cholesterol at this point, and you don't have a family history that's loaded with like heart disease, stroke, vascular disease, then I'd say, I would be more for people consuming whole milk rather than skim. The other thing that happens whenever we go from a less fatty product like skim milk is that, if you take fat out of it, there's something else that gets added into that product. And guess what it is, people? It is sugar. So a lot of, when you look back at the history of food and you see that there's this low fat craze that started, there really is a huge amount of
Doctors Without
fat
Borders
that happens.
demanding more answers about the deadly bombing on its hospital in Afghanistan, which our military has called a mistake. The group's international president, Joanne Liu.
It is unacceptable that the bombing of a hospital and the killing of staff and patients can be dismissed as collateral damage.
The group is calling for an investigation.
The group says it's the first time such a fact-finding mission has been activated under the rules of the Geneva Convention. The agency adding the measure is a first step aimed at establishing facts about the strike and the chain of command that led to it, not to press criminal charges.
Fox Radio.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. So we have another call here. Actually, no, we just missed it. Okay, so sorry about that technical difficulties here on the broadcast. So I want to get back to, we do actually have another call here. Hang on just a sec. Caller, you're live on the air.
Does it really matter what you put in your body to the extent that if you're eating a hamburger or tofu or whatever, doesn't it just break it down into basic chemicals? And it's just all hype. I mean, the vitamins matter. Does it matter if you eat a hamburger or a hot dog or a steak or vegetarians? I see vegetarians kicking the bucket more than people that eat meat. They all look sickly to me. So I'll listen on the radio. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, caller. So the question here is whether or not it really truly matters what you put into your body, vegetarian versus, eating full on meat. Yeah, it does actually matter to an extent because, one of the things that I really try to get at with people is, particularly if I have a patient who is eating a lot of processed foods. If you're eating processed foods, and those are foods that come from boxes, packages, bottles, and cans, then the nutritional density is not present in the food. So you're getting calories, but you're not getting those micronutrients that the body actually needs to function. And we do see disease states develop. One of the best ones that I can give an example of is for somebody who really doesn't eat sources that are rich in iron. So, things like your spinach, your green cruciferous vegetables, some sources of meat, those are all iron-rich sources. And when we have people who totally eliminate those sources because, let's say, they're eating too many snack cakes, then they're not getting enough iron in their diet. So the other example, and I was just talking about this on our previous question about, milk consumption and fat consumption, is whether or not people are actually getting the right types of fats in their body. So fat is a substance that we've really been, I think, taught to fear, and that's completely improper. Fat is actually, when you look at the macronutrients, there's 3 main macronutrients. Number 1, carbohydrate. Everybody knows about carbs. Number 2, fats. Number 3, proteins. And there's a 4th, but I don't include it for the topic of discussion, but it is alcohol. You can get calories from alcohol, but pretty much no nutritional substance. And I wouldn't recommend it as like a huge part of somebody's daily intake. But back in about the 70s, when we look at the history of food recommendations, the low-fat diet craze came out. And what we saw from that is that fat was taken out of a food and it was replaced with something else that tastes good. Fat tastes good. Our bodies like it. Fat also carries a higher caloric punch per gram. It's about 9 calories per gram compared to 4 calories per gram for both carbohydrates and proteins. Fats and proteins also burn at a slower rate. It's a little bit more time consuming for the body to break down. So you don't see these huge spikes in your blood sugar levels like you do with, say, eating a carbohydrate source. So what happens is when you take that really nice satiating flavor of fat out of food, you have to replace it with something else. Otherwise, it tastes like cardboard. So what the food industry has done is they make low-fat items, but if you start to read the sugar content and compare maybe their low-fat product with their full-fat product, you'll see that the low-fat product has more sugar added to it to make it taste better. So this is a ruse and one of the biggest myths out there, I think, with regards to food consumption, and even as it relates to athletics as well. Later on in the segment, I hope that we get to this. I like to talk about what types of fuel sources to be consuming, particularly during athletic exertion. And there's this long thought out myth that we shouldn't be consuming, fat and protein to a large extent during our workouts. And I'd really like to turn that upside down on its head because I think that's leading to some other fuel sources being consumed then that lead to compromise in athletic performance. And so we'll get to that here in just a bit. So getting back to the topic here, So I was before talking about how there's not a one size fits all for these eating styles. And a lot of times you have to consider things like, is there a disease state present already that we're trying to treat or avoid if there's a huge family history for it? And then there's other things too. The reality of the situation is that we are extremely busy individuals, and being able to try and attain a very complex meal prep program is not always feasible for some people. So in my visits with people, I really try to get down to the nitty gritty of like, what is the time crunch? Where do we really need to bite the bullet and start putting in more time and effort on meal prep and programs? And so that's where I try to help people select like a food eating style that fits their lifestyle with stuff. Also, taking a look, because you'll hear a lot of buzzwords in nutrition, and low carb is one that people definitely bring up a lot. And low carbohydrate, it works for a lot of people, but there's also some people it doesn't work for. For example, if you're a high performance athlete, somebody who does a lot of exertion at higher heart rate levels, then a low carbohydrate plan might not be the best for you during your peak performance times because you might not have enough energy stores available. So the one common truth that I think you can tie into all of these food programs, though, is that we need to be eating more real food. So real food is stuff that is not processed. And just yesterday, I was having a discussion with one of my patients about what qualifies something as being a processed food. Well, so you could say and argue that if you wanted to split hairs, just the simple state of cooking something is processing it, which is true. But there's an element, I think, that happens with the type of processed food that I'm referring to, which is when you start to get foods from boxes, packages, bottles, and cans, which I qualify as processed foods, then there is definitely something more than just simple cooking that may have happened to that food. There's oftentimes, in order to keep that food on a shelf, months at a time, so it can be shipped, so it can sit on the shelf, so you can buy it and then cook it. There's a lot of things that happen to that food that destroy the good types of nutrients in it. And those micronutrients are really what our body needs. So processed foods, they deliver calories, but they don't deliver nutritional density as well. And so, in fact, if you start to read food labels, one of the examples I've talked about in a previous show is like when you look at flour, for example. Flour has this sexy terminology thrown in with it on the ingredients label called enriched. And enriched is basically very simple, story shortened. They've taken the little fairy dust of like a little bit of vitamins and blown it into the flour. It's totally minuscule amounts of vitamins, but yet it sounds really seductive when you read like, oh, this is enriched. And then you start to see vitamins show up in your ingredients in your nutritional breakdown, but they're really insignificant amounts of vitamins when you look at how much you could be attaining from real food consumption. So again, processed foods, those are foods that have been altered so much that the nutritional density, those things like our vitamins or minerals or phytochemicals, they've been lost or they are present in insignificant amounts. And so I really want to have people try to eat more real food to get that amount of processed food consumption down and the amount of vitamins and nutrients up and what they're putting into their bodies. Fresh foods are really the best, in my opinion. I know it's more expensive to buy. People make that argument all the time. Like, oh, if I actually go and buy like fresh food, it's expensive. Well, this is where we're comparing apples and oranges. So no pun intended, of course, with that. Whenever people tell me that buying produce is expensive, that's expensive food as compared to what they can get at, say, their local fast food chain, guess what? The stuff that you're getting at the fast food chain, in my book, doesn't qualify as food. So if you really want to start comparing like apples to apples, then, start comparing your produce, which is a real source of food, in my opinion, with other retailers out there. Also, the concept of, do I eat organic versus non-organic? I try to get people to eat organic as much as possible. And again, it is an expense issue. And I think that with more demand placed on the system with regards to just having people eat more organic and asking their retailers to supply more organic, then we should actually see a price drop on that. But time will tell. Like I said, we have more. Just recently, we had a new grocery store open up in Hickson, which is Harvest Foods. Dr. Chip Crump is actually spearheading the effort there with that store and really putting a focus, I think, on nutrition as part of a healthy lifestyle. And I applaud him for doing that. The other thing here, too, that I try to encourage people to do is to ask where your food source comes from. So, and ask yourself, what did your food eat? So whenever we're looking at things like meat consumption, so if somebody wants to eat, let's say, beef, ask yourself, okay, is this from a meat source or a cattle source that was pasture, grass-fed, pasture-raised? Because I think what we're finding is, if you talk to people who buy grass-fed beef or consume it, or even people who don't, who might have, a taste of it in a restaurant, usually people say that type of meat actually tastes better to them. The thing that I'll add to it is that beef actually is not raised on antibiotics. And so the production of good bacteria in your gut, which is called the gut microbiome, which is an expression of all health, I think, in the body, you actually preserve that better because you're not consuming all of the antibiotics and growth hormones that those animals are fed in huge quantity just to get them to survive, I think, the livestock growth process. So it really, I think, behooves us to try and support, especially our local-based farmers and agricultural community, trying to get them to give us more of a selection. We might be paying a little bit more, but again, I think as we create more competition in this market, we'll see prices drop with regards to healthier selections for food. Also asking to, where's your food being grown? I try to get people to consume locally as possible. The drought conditions right now from, I think, global climate change are having a huge impact on droughts, and California is just one, for example. All of, 32 food tags yesterday in the grocery store, 29 of them were products from California. So really asking yourself, hey, where's my food coming from? You are listening to AM Hot News Talk Radio, and this segment we're focusing on nutrition. Over the next 15-minute segment, we're going to basically look at athletic goals, nutrition, and how you should be looking at what you're putting into your body and what you can do better for a healthier lifestyle. Stay tuned.
After some patchy morning fog, stay lots of sunshine and warm weather again for your Wednesday. Highs into the lower 80s tonight. Fair lows 58 to 60 for Thursday. Continued dry and warm. Highs 80 to 82 with more clouds and some late showers for Friday. Mammograms, bone density tests, and many other basic health screenings will be available at Abbas House Health Fair Tuesday, October 13th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Get more at abbashouse.com/health fair. And on WBEF,
you give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
Al Gore running is crazy. I know that all over the world, and you want average Americans to care about the environment. Don't you think you should be doing your part as well?
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Tired of insurance companies? Tired of doctors that won't spend time with you? Do something different. Leave the sick care model of medicine and come to Dr. Danielle Mitchell, the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health, where we're interested in long-term health solutions, not the quick fixes. Come see me, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. I'm all about the long-term healthcare solutions and doing what's best. On the web, you can find me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. That's ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Or call us at 875-1005, 875-1005, or find us on social media, Facebook, Dr. Danielle Mitchell, or the ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. Let's go, ya!
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Saudi Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
You want more business. You want to increase your bottom line. You want to spend less on advertising, imaging your business, and general expenses. You need Trade Bank. Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Trade Bank. Call now to get access to nearly 400 local businesses. Trade Bank. Call 877-2202. 877-2202. Trade Bank. You want to increase your cash flow, your competitive edge, attract new customers, and build a loyal customer base. You need Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Call right now. 877-2202. When you join Trade Bank, you'll get the benefit of free advertising in our monthly magazine, TradeBank.com, emails, and mailouts. Join Trade Bank now and receive your Trade Bank debit card with trade credits to spend any way you want with our wide variety of Trade Bank partners. For almost 30 years, Trade Bank has been your voice for small business, a member of the American Bankers Association, and in good standing with you. Trade Bank of Chattanooga. Call now for a free consultation, 877-2202. That's 877-2202. Trade Bank of Chattanooga.
Social media, we're on that. Hot News Talk Radio on Facebook, at Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Download the TuneIn app and follow us anywhere at any time. AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Good afternoon, Chattanooga. You are tuning in to AM Hot News Talk Radio on AM 1240. Join us on live stream, www.hotnewstalkradio.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter as well. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask during this last segment, our phone calls, we can take them live at 423-800-8949. I'm Dr. Danielle Mitchell, and this segment we're talking about my favorite, nutrition. So just to recap over this last half an hour, we've had lots of great questions with regards to what we're putting into our bodies. Does it matter? What types of food sources should we be focusing on? High fat versus low fat. Just to summarize those last, that half hour, fat is okay. Go for a healthy fat source. So, when you find products on the shelves that say low fat, that is code for high sugar. So if you're somebody who may have like high cholesterol, if you may have a high family history and risk of disease for things like cardiovascular events, strokes, vascular disease, things of that nature, then you might want to watch some of your fat consumption with regards to animal saturated fats. Today in the news, you're going to see a lot of stuff about the FDA releasing new guidelines about saying that the dairy consumption and the fats from dairies don't cause cardiovascular disease. I am completely skeptical of this. I think that, again, bottom line, there's a lot of money in DC that talks and makes its way into recommendations and guidelines. And so I'm really all about having people try to eat more real food, the consumption of a higher plant base in their diet. And if they're having issues with symptoms and or disease, then think about coming into a registered dietitian, coming to a physician who's well-trained in nutrition, which is something that is sometimes hard to come by, but I do welcome people to my practice at the Chattanooga Sports Institute and Center for Health. We focus on preventative medicine, not just giving people prescriptions and sending them out the door. And to give you a little bit of history and my background on nutrition, I'm somebody who I'm pretty proud to share with people, and I openly share this with my patients. I talk the talk and I walk the walk. I've lost almost 100 pounds through proper nutrition and exercise. and really having this journey now since 2007, when I weighed almost 250 pounds on a 5'6" frame. I decided that I was going to make a change, and so I started incorporating more of a robust understanding of nutrition and what we're putting into our bodies, and really how we can avoid disease by looking very closely at what goes into our bodies. There was an interesting discussion point that I was having with somebody very recently on the recommendations for colonoscopy. And the recommendation as it is right now at age 50, everybody actually qualifies for screening colonoscopy. And so I will discuss that with my patients during their physicals if they qualify. And what I've noticed is that whenever people have had colonoscopy, either A, they're having them at a much earlier age now because of symptoms that they may be having, and B, it used to be that a 10-year recommendation would be given if you had a quote-unquote normal colonoscopy. But it seems like there are more, and this is anecdotal, I will say that up front, but my impression is that I very rarely get a patient anymore that has been given the 10-year, hey, this is, you're okay, you don't need your next one for 10 years. And it makes me wonder, is there an increase in amount of disease basically being polyps that are being diagnosed? And to get back at the previous caller's question about, does it really matter what I'm putting into my mouth? This also illustrates the fact, if we are starting to see a higher incidence and frequency of things like polyps, colon polyps, which are basically the predecessors of cancer, then yeah, it does actually matter, I think, what we're putting in our bodies, because processed foods, and then I think all the chemicals that come along with, things that are raised non-organic. And when we're looking at things, like antibiotics being added to our food supply, the hormones, all the chemicals that go into growing some of our mainstream agriculture, I oftentimes think geez Louise, the gut just must be like an absolute war zone. And when you have a gut lining, which is comprised of cells that have a very high rapid turnover rate, it kind of makes teleological sense when you're having a cell that has a high amount of cellular production and turnover. That's also something that shares a common thread with cancer. And all it takes is one genetic alteration for that cell then to become an abnormally producing cell. And when you're exposing cells to toxins continuously, then are we starting to see this higher amount of disease expression? And not only with colon polyps, but we see a huge amount of things like autoimmune disease. I mean, the amount of diagnosis of autoimmune disease is going up in frequency. We're starting to see more allergies to foods than we've ever seen before. And so, does it matter what we put in our mouths? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind. And so I'm really trying to get people to think about, not only from how can I feel better day to day, but this can literally be how do I save my life? How do I live a healthier, happier, longer life? And it really goes back to, I think, what we in turn are fueling our bodies with and exposing ourselves to. So food for thought, no pun intended. So getting here at the last part of the discussion, I take care of a lot of endurance athletes and athletes in particular in our region. And one of the common questions that I'll get is what should I be eating for athletic performance? And this is a great question because, it is a huge question to answer. And so my first is okay, well, how much of your diet right now is coming from processed food consumption? Because that's obviously a huge contributor to your athletic performance. And so we try to, my goal with people is to get processed food consumption to be less than 20% of their total intake. And so we start to look at are you really packing your diet full of things that are nutritionally dense? And that's real food. So your fruits and your vegetables, the freshest sources possible, trying to get enough protein in there. So a lot of times, and I'll have some special dietary needs athletes who I do have a couple of vegetarian and vegan athletes in my practice. And for those of you who aren't familiar with vegetarian versus vegan, vegetarian is basically no meat, but they'll consume dairy and other animal products like eggs. And then vegan is no animal sources whatsoever. And the challenge that we'll oftentimes face with those athletes is that trying to get, you can and you do get protein from your sources of plants, the question is it a complete protein? And so animal protein is considered a complete protein. Plant protein is lacking some amino acids, so it's considered an incomplete protein. But you can very easily supplement, and there's wonderful sources out there that allow people to get enough protein in their diet to support athletic performance. So it's not impossible to be a vegetarian athlete or even a vegan athlete. There's plenty of ways and plenty of healthy ways to have that goal accomplished. Other big buzzwords that I like to talk about, which eating style is best for me. I do tend to have a lot of CrossFitters in my population, and CrossFitters, which is a type of strength and endurance training combined together, they like to ascribe to a dietary plan that's called paleo. And the best way to summarize paleo is it's kind of like the caveman diet. It's very prehistoric. So basically, if there's a food source out there that a caveman could access, then that would be usually something that they could consume. I like paleo. It's one that, talk about eating real food. It is basically, that's the foundation of the diet. I'm also a huge fan of Mediterranean diet. And if you start looking at Mediterranean diet, there are some elements of Mediterranean diet that I would consider to be processed, particularly some of the pastas and the grains. But depending on the person and their individual profile and genetic makeup, that might be something that is totally okay for them to have. In particular, what I really like about Mediterranean diet is that it emphasizes the healthy fats, the omega-3 fats. These are the anti-inflammatory fats. So things like your avocados, your coconut oils, your olive oils, your nuts, and your seeds, those are wonderful sources of omega-3. Looking at cold water fish like salmon and sardines, not only is there a huge amount of protein in those, but there's also healthy omega-3 fats that are just really great for reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease. Other types of food questions with regards to athleticism is, should I go low carb? And this is I love this topic as well. Low carbohydrate in athletic performance is really one that I have to ask the athlete, okay, what type of exertion are you looking at doing in your sport? Because there are different fuel systems that our body utilizes. It's not just like, oh, hey, we have this one constant fuel supply that we tap and that's all we use. It's actually pretty complicated. And to distill it down very simply, whenever we're in the first 30 seconds or so of hard exertion, so you're out there sprinting, that's really, you're going to be tapping a very quick fuel source. Carbohydrates, that's what it's all about. But if you are somebody who is tapping, basically a long exertion, then you're going to be wanting to you could use fats and you can use protein for that as well. So looking at basically what your carb sources should be, if you're somebody who's out there being an endurance athlete and you're a carb-based athlete, then consume real carbohydrate sources. I'm not a huge fan of having high amounts of high fructose corn syrup making it into athletes' diets. I try to have them do basically, making sure that we have like normal natural sources. Also looking at making sure that people are always trying to incorporate fats and proteins into their diet in a healthy way. So if you have questions with regards to any of these recommendations, please feel free to contact me at ChattanoogaSportsInstitute.com. I'm also on Facebook as well under Dr. Danielle Mitchell. And today's discussion, it's just the tip of the iceberg with regards to nutrition. I invite you guys to call in on my next segment. Stay tuned in 2 weeks where I will actually be discussing strength training and the insider scoop. And I hope to have a special guest on at that segment as well. You are listening to AM Hot News Talk Radio. Please join us on the web, www.hotnewstalkradio.com. Also, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Dr. Danielle Mitchell signing out for This Doc is in the house.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
After some patchy morning fog, today lots of sunshine and warm weather again for you.